After 10 years of publication, the 8th part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, JOJOLION, has come to its conclusion. So JOJOLION is over, and it's kind of a big deal. This is, without a doubt, I believe, the most divisive part of this franchise thus far. There are going to be so many people that, with this part, believe that this is by and far the best part of JoJo's that we've had, and others who think that, without a doubt, JOJOLION is the worst part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And this is largely in part to the fact that Araki does really well to try and go against the trends and tropes that he's introduced throughout the first 7 parts and do something entirely different with JOJOLION. And I think that that was an entirely great idea, because after over 3 decades with 7 previous storylines, it's very easy for something to just fall into monotony and become boring, and that is absolutely the opposite of what you want. So even though it might have some fans just completely disliking what was done with JOJOLION, in general, this is a very positive move for the franchise. Now, generally when it comes to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure parts, the plot is pretty similar throughout each piece. You're introduced to the protagonist, you learn about them, who they are, and what their ultimate goal is. You meet some of their allies, they fight some enemies that become allies, they all go off on a bizarre adventure of their own, ultimately meeting against the final boss. There's a big fight, and ultimately the protagonist meets their goal. And JOJOLION kind of follows that same basic structure, but it turns every single major point of that structure on its head, doing it in such a different way. Starting with the introduction of our completely enigmatic protagonist. When we're introduced to the main character, not only do we not know anything about him, but he doesn't know anything about himself to begin with. And very soon we're met with the idea that this story is going to be about this guy figuring out his true identity, who he is and where he came from. However, very soon we're thrown into the Higashikata family, and the main character is given a name. He's given this adopted name of Josuke Higashikata, which is of course familiar as that was the name of the protagonist from Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. He's given this name by the patriarch of the family, Noriyusuke Higashikata, who then introduces him to the rest of the family. And they are made up of a bunch of very strange or bizarre individuals. The nature of the story at this point is just complete mystery. Everything is a giant question mark. We don't know who Josuke really is, and we really don't know anything about the Higashikata family. And with that, there's a sense of unease that the reader shares alongside the protagonist, because Josuke doesn't know who he really can trust throughout this story. And that's really expertly portrayed by the fact that every interaction that he has with these characters early on can turn into some kind of conflict where he doesn't know if he has to worry for his life or not. And of course, with the fact that this is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, those conflicts mean that there are a bunch of stand battles. And stand battles are always an exciting part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as a franchise because they're such a creative way to step away from the typical mold of just strength against strength and introduce the creativity of the creator in giving us the idea of using a character's wit and creativity and intelligence to figure out how they need to face off against a particular foe or get out of a certain situation. Now, as the story moves forward, Noriyusuke Higashikata does reveal to Josuke a little bit more about his family. The fact that they've been facing off against this generations-long curse, and the fact that he's trying to just get rid of that curse, expunge it from their family with the help of this fruit called the Lokakaka. However, there are many other people who are trying to get this rare fruit for themselves because of the properties, the healing properties that it offers. Included in those people who are trying to get the fruit for themselves are the rock humans, which is probably my favorite new concept that's introduced in JOJOLION because it harkens back to elements that were introduced back in parts 1 and 2 that were largely forgotten about once stands were introduced. And that was one of my favorite things that happens in Steel Ball Run as well, as we're introduced to things in that part that harken back to the very beginning of the series. It really feels like Araki is like, yes, I know that I didn't utilize some of the stuff from the beginning of the series after I introduced stands, so now I'm going to use it all together and make it into one big, interesting, interconnected story. And he does so really expertly in JOJOLION. Now, the rock humans are very similar to typical humans. They look similar aside from the fact that they might have little spikes on their body, but they are evolved in a way that instead of carbon making up most of their body, they're made up of silicon. And some things are different, such as the fact that they age differently, they have to hibernate, but they have a very specific reason for wanting to get this fruit. And thus that brings us to the major conflict of JOJOLION. We see this fight basically for the Higashikata family to retain and use this fruit to cure the curse that's been plaguing them for generations, but we also see the mysterious enigmatic rock people who want to take it for themselves. Another part that I really love about JOJOLION, though, is I mentioned before the enigmatic nature of everything and how Josuke really doesn't know who he can trust whenever he meets the Higashikata family. And that's one of my favorite parts about this story, is that you really don't know anything. You really meet everyone without knowing what's truly going on, and there's always that sense of nervousness and unease about what everyone's true motive actually is. And as the story progresses forward and we see some of the members of the Higashikata family that get involved with the rock humans, it becomes clear that there are some nefarious motives that some of them do in fact have. And I think that this ties in very well with what I consider to be the main theme behind JOJOLION. Ultimately, while JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has always been a story about a family, the Joestar family and their lineage, JOJOLION is the first part of the story that really feels like it is about family, in that it is about the Higashikata family and what each member is willing to do and willing to go through to protect themselves and to protect their family, to protect the ones that they love. And oftentimes we see that this results in less than positive circumstances, and some of the members of the Higashikata family taking things maybe too far and going in directions that will have consequences. And we do see those consequences play out as the story progresses forward. And while Josuke's story begins as one that is more or less about self-discovery and trying to figure out who he really is, he learns that, but in the end, he discovers that who he is now is not who he was, and he will never be who he was again. That person needs to be laid to rest, because Josuke now has gone through so much as this new version of himself, this new character, and he's become so centrally involved in the conflict and the lives of the Higashikata family. He's become so involved in this family and puts his own life on the line for these people that he was just kind of thrust together with. But it ultimately comes down to the realization that this family is his family, and he is Josuke Higashikata. And I take this to really mean that who you are is not dictated by your past, because who you were is not always who you are and who you will be. Josuke finds that he is a different version of anything that he's ever been before. And that really is still a journey of self-discovery. And at the end of the day, Josuke embracing who he is helps him to find a place with people who care about him, these people who have laid down their lives for him just as he has for them. And as the series comes to its close and we reach the final pages of the final chapter, ultimately we see Josuke with his family. Now, JOJOLION is not my favorite part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, as that title still belongs to Steel Ball Run. But I think that without a doubt, Araki put so much into this part that I wouldn't hesitate in calling it his magnum opus. He puts so much meaning into every character and every interaction that we see throughout here, and the idea of Josuke's journey to find himself and ultimately how he does find himself is something that is so powerful. It's something that it resonates with me, and I know that it's something that'll resonate with so many other people as well. And now as we're here on the doorstep of part 9 and we have no idea what Araki is going to do next, I have nothing but the absolute confidence that he's going to completely blow JOJOLION out of the water with whatever he has in stores for us in part 9. So those are some basic thoughts that I have about JOJOLION. I don't know if it's much of a review, but just to share the way that this series kind of made me feel and the way that it differs so heavily from any part of JoJo's that we've seen come before it. And that's basically what I wanted to articulate with this video. And as well, I had to put this out there because I will soon be doing a video exploring the entire bibliography of Hirohiko Araki and wanted to get my thoughts out about JOJOLION before I did that, so that anyone who's interested can have this to go off of. I am very interested to hearing what my audience thought about this part of JoJo's in particular. If you read it, please let me know down below in the comments. What was your thoughts? How did you feel about the conclusion? Were you satisfied? Are you excited for part 9? Or do you think that JOJOLION was just a steaming pile? Whatever your thoughts were, please sound off in the comments down below. I'm interested in hearing them. As well, thank you so much for joining me in this video. I hope that y'all enjoyed watching me talk about this, and I'll see you all on the next one. Peace out.